We often hear that discipline is really important, and in a lot of ways it is. But when discipline doesn't work, it's often hiding something deeper. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If discipline was going to work for you, it probably would have by now. When people try to discipline themselves and fail, they usually assume the problem is laziness or lack of effort. But most of the time, that's not the real issue. For many people, when discipline doesn't work, the problem isn't a lack of effort. It's misalignment. Movement and action are extremely important, and I would always recommend to start with movement or action first. But if you don't know where you are going or why you're moving, you end up exhausting yourself with meaningless actions that don't really lead you anywhere. Because moving without direction is like getting in a car without knowing your destination. You keep turning, changing direction, going back and forth, and eventually you get tired, you get frustrated, and you get nowhere. That's why the first step is not discipline. The first step is figuring out where you're going and why. There's an important distinction here. There's forcing discipline, where you push yourself to act through pressure, guilt, or obligation. And then there's alignment with self-authority, where discipline becomes part of who you are. It becomes part of your identity. When discipline is forced, every action feels heavy or meaningless. When it comes from self-authority, every action reinforces that identity that you created. The first step is alignment with self-authority. The second step is action. And those two always go together. Alignment without action doesn't take you anywhere. You just stay exactly where you are. But action without alignment will take you somewhere, just not necessarily where you actually want to go. That's why building an internal reference, this self-authority, that's why building an internal reference point is essential. Not based on what society wants or what your family wants or what you surrounding expect of you, not what your friends think you should do or people around you think you should do, but really based on this internal reference. And this is where self-authority comes in. It allows you to figure out what you want, what you are trying to do. Once that is clear, you can start identifying the steps that actually lead you there. And this is important. You can't reach your destination using someone else's map. What worked for someone else might not work for you. So instead of trying to copy discipline systems, routine, or rules, you can create your own map. From there, you can start taking action with self-authority, not forced discipline. And that self-authority removes any kind of negotiation. Because it is part of your identity, every single action you will take will reinforce that identity. And not taking an action will be like not being who you are. That way you don't have to convince yourself every day. You're no longer debating internally. It becomes part of your identity, not just something you should do or something that will be nice to do. I like to say that self-authority is discipline without force. Because when something is part of who you are, not acting on it would be like not being yourself. So the real question you have to ask yourself is, what kind of person am I choosing to become? That decision alone creates movement. Because when something feels right as part of who you are, of your identity, you don't need discipline. You move naturally. You take action naturally. But when something comes to contradict that identity or that strong idea of who you are, discipline turns into violence against yourself. That's why simply forcing discipline doesn't really work long term. Instead, building that identity and taking action that will reaffirm that identity through self-authority will work much better. That self-authority says, this is decided, there's no inner debate. So instead of asking how to discipline yourself better, you can ask, what decision am I avoiding making? And what kind of identity do I need to commit to in order to move forward? And this is where real discipline begins. I hope this video helped you. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.